I'm Eva O, and this is the Teakink podcast. I've been a dominatrix since 2011, and I would like to spill the tea on my life. Thank you for listening. Dating as a dominatrix. What an adventure. I mean, now I've found a bit of a rhythm, but I've been doing this since 2011, and it's been quite the ride. So when you work as a dominatrix at the kind of volumes that I used to work at, sometimes up to 10 people a day, you get to toy with so many different people and their desires, their differing desires. You get to indulge in gear and play in such quick and tight succession that it is pretty amazing what you get exposed to and what you get to experience. And I'm very grateful for that side of my playtime. But it is work, and it's been interesting understanding how work is work and how to keep some headspace for myself. And I personally don't find it so easy to be like, this is the work box and this is the personal box. But I am happy overall. And so I think that's the best that I can personally go for. All right, let us start at the beginning, shall we? When I first started working as a dominatrix, I was single. Was I dating? Not really. I feel like so much of my time was taken up with reading and practicing and learning about the job that I didn't even really think about dating. But I would still see my friends, and my friends did, like, one of them did this thing every Sunday evening where they would have a dinner at their house and they would invite like different groups of friends together. And I went to one of these evenings and they had invited, I have no idea where they found this person. Let's call him Derrick. They found this person, and he came to dinner, and they had already laid a little bit of the groundwork. They said that he was very good looking and that we would probably get on. And they didn't elaborate much into that. I didn't really care. I just wanted to go and eat. And I get to dinner, and he is very beautiful, and he's very, very polite and very gentle, but yet quite still. And I did really like all of those things, and I did really appreciate them. And we did start dating. But I had just quite literally stepped into the world of domination. And prior to this, I didn't have as much feedback as I did in terms of people reacting so positively to my assertive personality. Before, I definitely did find people who were more in tune with living with that. But I think that as a woman, especially 20 years ago in certain societies, and I mean, still now we have many issues, but we're going back to my life 20 years ago. I definitely found people who were happy with me and who I was, which is great. But even then, the reason why I even understood what a dominatrix was because one of those lovely people made a joke about the fact that I was assertive and directive. And they said that I would be a great dominatrix. And that just goes to show how an assertive woman is not so common in a lot of men's minds. So anyway, that aside, meeting Derrick, right? We decided his name was Derrick. Meeting Derrick at my friend's dinner We connect. I think we exchange numbers. I don't think we do so much more than that. Maybe we arrange to like have a drink or something like this. But it starts to spiral very quickly into an entanglement of sorts because I do find him very attractive and he is doing everything that I ask. And in my newfound world of being this apprentice dominatrix where people are doing as I ask, I am riding off of this high that I haven't gotten to experience so much in my previous life. Because for the most part, even though I understood what I wanted and I knew how to ask that of the people who were closer to me, in the wider world, I had not really done that so immediately with people. And to have that responded to so positively in the dungeon and to be paid for things, it was very validating, but also a huge rush. It was like a lifetime of not being able to speak up, finally validated. And it kind of comes out like all at once. You know, it's like I had very poor boundaries, essentially. So very sweet, lovely, decided his name is Derrick, is doing everything that I say. He's driving in from outer Sydney, like at the drop of a hat. He's bringing me things that I saw randomly that I kind of have like a drive for in a moment. But the point when I may have had an inkling that I was taking it a little bit too far with somebody who I had not negotiated any of these things with was when we were at this like communal dining, like, you know, very hip sort of style eating scenario in this small restaurant in Sydney. And he said something a little bit stupid. He wasn't the brightest. And I slapped him in front of everyone who was sharing the table with us. And without that ever having been negotiated as a possibility between us. And he just rolled with it. Like, he didn't say anything. He didn't. Yeah. And I realize now that I was on a high of not having had the chance to act on my desires in a free way for so much of my life until that point. And it came out in a way that didn't understand proper negotiations, proper respect of people's boundaries, of public spaces, of so many things. I've had to learn why I acted that way. I had to sit more with that rush of excitement of finally being able to feel like I could assert myself anywhere. And I had to learn better skills, essentially. So I am not upset. I'm disappointed that I did such a thing, but I also understand where I was coming from at the time. And if Derrick, whose name is not Derrick, is listening, I apologize for not being more careful with your kind and accepting personality. But I tired of Derrick. And very sweet, does almost anything for me, anytime, anywhere, but just was not aligned intellectually in terms of interests, in terms of worldview, and not in a way even that I found interesting to learn from, unfortunately. And so it degraded quite quickly. It was start and stop over in like, maybe 3 months or something like this. But it was a very intense first experience of me experiencing my newfound way of potentially navigating a relationship. And then I think after this, things went wild. Things, wild my way. So back then, we only had like Match.com, I think, and OkCupid, and OkCupid was the more like cool one. Does anybody say the word cool anymore? That probably shows you how uncool I potentially am. But it was the more modern one. And you answered a lot of questions, and it matched you up with people who were more aligned, apparently. And I answered a lot of questions. And actually, the people who it brought to me intellectually, it was really quite nice to share time with them. But there was a lot of lies in terms of how people were presenting themselves, whether that was photos that were a bit off, or, things like height, which is now I understand is like such a common thing, but I didn't understand that then, that it is something that people have great prejudice about, and therefore internalize and therefore lie. But I did the OkCupid questionnaires, got matched up with many people. And in my usual excitable way, I committed to something like 4 people in a week. And I went on these dates in very quick succession. And it was really lovely to chat with people who were very much intellectually on a similar page. It was fun. It was interesting, sometimes challenging, and I like those things, but I was not attracted to any of them physically. And maybe I wonder if that's a little bit of a theme, that I am intrigued with a similar mind, but not attracted to it. I don't know. We'll get to what I'm attracted to these days soon. But I went on these OkCupid dates, lovely, fine, good times. Went on like a second date with a few of them. I think it totaled like 7 dates within like a week and a half, 2 weeks. But no sparks. And I was not yet super forthcoming with my job. This was only a few months in. I sort of told one person, I kind of told another, and I broke in somebody a little bit by saying that I was doing a photo shoot, and it was a little bit more risque than the average, just to see. I feel like now that actually those were the kinds of people who would have been totally cool with understanding it, but I had to navigate my internal inability to potentially explain what it is that I was doing. I mean, it's such a common question, right? People like to ask, what do you do for work? Because then they can start to conceptualize what kind of person you are, what your day kind of looks like. It gives a lot of texture to who you might be, because we spend so much of our time working in this current society. And so I understand why it's a question, but how I wasn't so ready to tell people this job, because even though I personally didn't feel like I had a hang up about it, I understood that a lot of other people reacted, or even just reacted, right? And I wasn't used to being reacted to, I guess. And as a sex worker, as a dominatrix, same difference. People are reacting to that word, to those words, and they are putting these images in their mind, and they're putting their projections of their own sexuality onto you in that moment. It's a lot to handle. And I didn't know how to handle that yet. I understood that was what was probably going to happen, and I didn't have the words to be able to try to get people on board and to make my dinner a palatable experience for me. But So that's why I wasn't very forthcoming back then. I was not yet experienced enough to be able to tackle society's shortcomings. Fair enough. And I didn't have the energy. I was working a lot and I wanted to have a social experience and personal connection, but it took a lot of work. And I enjoy that level of energy expenditure. I enjoy putting that much effort into something, into my work, into learning something. But it meant that I just didn't have the time to learn everything about this job and its complex place in society and people's minds. But all right, OkCupid, not maybe the greatest forum for me. What other forums are there? Match.com, something like that. Didn't look very much my demographic. So I thought, all right, I'm just going to see what other platforms there are out there. There were no dating apps at this point in time, and no Tinder even, which I am permanently banned for, even though I've never, ever worked through there. Anyway, but back to what I did after OkCupid. I searched for other platforms, and at the time in Australia, there was a platform called Red Hot Pie. I don't know, maybe it still exists, but it was primarily for swingers, which I didn't know if I was. But it seemed to be more sexually liberated. And so I thought, okay, maybe this is a platform that is suitable for me and my job, that I might not have to explain too much with the people who are on this platform. Now, the swinging community, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't definitely not call myself a swinger. I think that it's very much its own culture, kind of like the BDSM culture is also a culture, subculture. But I think that swinging clubs, swingers, that it has had longer popularity in sexuality subcultures, and it has more facilities, and therefore that was the website that kind of came up. There wasn't like a BDSM dating site, except for FetLife, which I can also go into a little bit. But I didn't use FetLife. I was using Red Hot Pie, and I can't remember exactly what the parameters are that you're ticking or you're interested in. Everything to do with sexuality primarily. I went to a couple of meetups and at like different this one club. It used to be called Good Bar. I used to go when I was like 14 or 15. But it changed names, and then it became this place that Red Hot Pie had its little mingle mixer, whatever, in. And I started to get some interesting matches. Yeah. And there was this one, I don't know what he did for work. It had the finance bro kind of vibe. But he he had an apartment just down the road from my in-call, actually, in Darlinghurst. All white apartment, very nice. And I remember I think he was my first Red Hot Pie date. And I don't think we ever talked about what I did for work. I think it was like, hi, I like this. I also like this. Okay, I live here. What about this time? And this was all like sort of email/messaging system, right? No app back then. So everything's a little bit slower. But arrange time, go over to the place and walk in. He sort of shows me around a tiny bit, and then we end up having sex. and this was like such a new notion to me. I understand this like hookup culture, this like good old grinder, etc. It happens very fast. But for me, I was not necessarily a sexually active person prior to entering the industry, which sounds ridiculous to some people. But when I started, I had a picture in my mind of what a dominatrix was, but I didn't have any experience with a flogger or understanding spanking, aside from knowing that I wanted it every now and then. I would ask and direct people for it. Yeah. Or what a collar was. And so like I had no clue. And I had no clue that there were parties where people would go and have sex with each other's parties and partners. I was so clueless. And so this like hookup website thing, this whole experience was all very novel and exciting for me. And I ended up meeting him quite a few times. He was also quite interesting. He was my first experience to like fillers and Botox. Like I still don't have much experience with this, but back then I didn't even know it was a thing. Like I didn't even know that like gel nails, like not just paint, like color paint, but like a shellac was a thing. I was not interested in any of these beautification sort of things. But I remember I turned up to his house maybe the third time and he looked totally different, like really puffy. And now I know that it's like just the post like filled kind of face sort of a thing. So I remember him very clearly for that. Yeah. But yeah, it would always be the same. I can't remember his name. I don't know if we ever had a conversation. It was just like really, really nice and rough sex. And that, I don't know, maybe that happened however many times until I left Sydney. And there was another one, which was a significantly different experience. A younger boy who was in like a share house in like Bondi. And it was fun, but thankfully I didn't get anything, but he had called me and he told me that he had chlamydia. So after that, it was like, okay. So maybe I won't bother with that one. I had never had a conversation with him. He did seem like the nicer one out of the two, though. But that was quite fun. That was an interesting thing. But again, I wasn't getting to know anybody. I didn't even tell them what I did for work, or they didn't have any idea what I enjoyed, how I spent my time. But did it ever get to a point when did it get to a point? Obviously, it gets to a point where I connect with people because you have to. It gets very lonely. But, yeah, I'm remembering. So I do all of these little entanglements. It's enjoyable, it's fun, but I'm not really meeting people who I'm connecting with. And I'm finding it hard to tell people what it is that I do for work. Because I knew that having to navigate them and their sexuality and it shouldn't be my responsibility, but it would trigger something in them a lot of the times. And it would have to become a conversation at least. And it was just energy I didn't want to expend. And so I go through life enjoying my job, not falling in love with any clients. That did happen for me, but much later. And then I start touring. I start touring, and with the touring, because it's not this one facility that people are coming to me, I'm not in a learning headspace as much anymore. I'm on my own. I'm going out and having longer experiences, sometimes dinner with these different clients. I start to develop crushes on some of them. And how does this pan out? And sometimes it's mutual. And I give a little bit of leniency, maybe around time, and then around more time. And this is recipe for disaster here. But I didn't know that because it was enjoyable. And then it starts to move into more intimate spaces that reflect more like a vanilla exchange. And then I'm not sure how to treat it anymore, but I still see them as a client. And then I'm thinking about one person in particular. And then he turned around and he said, I've moved out of the headspace of paying you. And I think it was a bit of a wake-up call for me because he was a reliable client. And I think that there's something about their attraction and their entanglement with you that can sometimes make them a more regular client, but I think it also makes them a bigger burden. And if you are not navigating that in understanding where the lines are and how close or how far to stay away from them and how to talk about it so that it's on the table and how to be honest with yourself in terms of how much you may or may not be playing to it, I think it becomes very complicated. And I think that was a wake-up call that now whenever somebody starts by paying me as a client, that is it. It's my rule. It doesn't have to be like that for other people, but my rule is that even if I develop a crush or whatever, I keep them in the paying me for my time box. Yeah, it's just better for my sanity. But that is something that I've only learned actually over the years, yeah. But I started dating more intimately, I would say about a year and a half into the job. So not just meeting people up for sex, not just going on like random dates just for shits and giggles. It was meeting somebody who I felt like I could connect with, who it was easeful to talk about my job with, who I wanted to keep in touch with and spend time with. And it's a really huge story. I think I might speak about that on the next episode. But I learned a lot in that relationship in terms of how people interact with my work and my being and how that can change and how it can be held against you. And that was actually a pretty terrible relationship. And it was also with somebody who is a celebrity, which comes with its whole other host of weird power things. So I think it deserves its own episode, don't you? Next episode. I'll do that the next episode. But let's get back to the dating. So now I found this person. I felt like I wanted to connect. You heard about how complicated it is. It belongs in its own episode. It taught me a lot in terms of how I might need to screen people better and take the time to see how they actually interact with their own sexuality, how their friends interact with the concept of sexuality and myself. And I've taken all of these learnings as much as I can, and I've always just tried to apply them to future interactions because I'm a sucker for social connection. I mean, it would, of course, be easier to not think about having to explain myself, maybe even dating only workers, which I've considered, but I hadn't found any that I thought I wanted to actually spend time with. But I'm at a place now where I don't have to just date a worker, where I am on some of the apps that are more sexually aware, like Field. I like Field. And I actually have luck on Hinge and Bumble, but I'm very, very clear with what I ask for. I ask for a sub that is interested in play parties. That's it. Like, very, very clear. And that is what I feel like is the gap in my life. I feel like I have vanilla things that are grounding and lovely and are understanding of my work. But right now, that's all that I'm kind of looking for. So how did I find the vanilla grounding things? I think that for me, my primary thing is that people are in service to me, that they are attentive And I actually met my most recent partner through a friend of mine. And this friend is also a dominatrix, and they've known each other for a few years. Not super well, but tangentially. And they've seen each other many times, and they have been on holidays together, etc. And so there is an awareness of what my job is and what she does for work. And I knew immediately when I met him that I would like this one because there was an attentiveness in his eyes. And that's my number one trait. When somebody is able to be perceptive of what I'm saying, of what I need, I love it. And I just gently followed through on it. And I am where I am with this particular partner today. But some things happened in the initial stages of this. He was not very responsive. Sometimes he would not commit to certain things. And I did something that I would never have done when I first started. So say 15 years ago. I was very, very clear. I was like, I'm interested in you. I don't understand why you are not being responsive. And I would like some clarity, or please understand that I will be taking my distance because this is a waste of my time. Otherwise, I was very clear. I understood what it was that I was looking for, and I was able to just lay it out on the table. I had nothing to lose. I felt like I had nothing to lose. I felt like I was only going to lose my time and my energy and my effort, which are precious to me, because I've learned that people value that very highly and that it is my commodity in life. And I didn't want to waste my time and therefore my earning capacity. And this particular person responded very well to it. Not everybody does. But then we move on. It's an incompatibility situation. But I'm still on the apps for finding submissive play partners, particularly in public play parties. And I don't use FetLife because, well, FetLife, if you don't know what that is a website where it's kind of like Facebook back in the day, but for people who are interested in kink. And so there are message boards where people go into events that are local or specific things that they're into, and then there's huge conversations about it. And I use it to find events, but I guess if I was maybe more pointed about it, I might have some luck on there, but it's just never really worked out for me. I get a lot of very short messages that are not reading my profile and understanding what it is that I'm looking for. And I just archive it. I don't have time or energy for people who are not going to take the time before I do. Because I guess I'm quite spoiled for attention also. And I've had to learn how to just trim the fat as much as I can in order to stay sane. But that's kind of where I'm at now. I think I've learned a lot of interesting skills from the job in terms of even greater assertiveness and like clear communication styles, like I mentioned. But and I think that the job itself has also been very empowering and validating for me to understand that people want to give me what I want. And over time, I've learned more skills through practice, through getting informed, through reading, through being around other sex workers and sex worker organizations. And I've learned more about what sex work is, how it fits in the world, why people have a prejudice, what could be better systems, the case for decriminalization. And all of this has empowered me to be able to sit at a dinner table and have these conversations with people rather than just tense up at how tense they get. Because a lot of people have a lot of issues with their own sexuality and they're just projecting it on people who are more open with it. And so dating as a dominatrix has been very informative. It's been absolutely exhausting. But I think I am finally at a point where I am quicker to understand what it is that I'm looking for and communicate it and not take it harshly when people don't match with my desires. And to understand that it's often about an incompatibility rather than a right wrong sort of a scenario. And I'm pretty happy with where it is at the moment. And also another thing, I thought that I had trouble finding these sub play party partners, but I'm realizing now that I've had a little bit of time to decompress here in London at home, that it's more because I haven't had the time. I've been traveling so much. So I'm just going to try that out for a little bit more. And it'll be interesting to see how my desires shift and change. But that's where I'm at for now. So thank you very much for listening to my dating woes and triumphs. And I look forward to speaking with you next time.